The bridge of the Terra Nova didn't just shake, it convulsed, a predator waking from a cage of its own making. Red warning lights bathed Captain Thorne's sharp profile, turning his usual calm expression into something carved from granite. He didn't look at the tactical map where the Vorg swarm bled across the monitors like a virus. He looked at me. His hand shot out, grabbing my waist and pulling me flush against his chest, the impact knocking the breath from my lungs. I could feel the thrum of the ship's engines vibrating through his armor, matching the terrifyingly slow beat of his heart. "Captain, inhibitors are at 20%, the flight officer screamed over the klaxons. Thorne leaned in, his lips brushing my ear, his voice a low rumble that cut through the chaos. "Alara, do not look away. You need to see this." "They'll destroy us," I gasped, gripping his forearms. "We have to retreat." Thorne turned to the view screen, his eyes cold, devoid of the gentle warmth I had known for weeks. "We wrote the rules of war to protect the galaxy from us, not the other way around." 3 weeks earlier, the silence between us had been suffocating, born not of danger but of awkward, stifling propriety. I stood on the observation deck of the Draconis Royal Spire, looking at the man I was bound to by an arranged marriage. Captain Elias Thorne of the Terran Union stood with his hands clasped behind his back, admiring the nebula. He looked harmless. That was the consensus on the Terrans. They were a fragile species who had sued for peace to avoid extinction. This union was a charity case, a frantic bid for galactic diplomacy by a race that knew they were outmatched. "It is beautiful," Thorne said softly. "We don't have skies like this on Earth anymore." "I imagine not," I replied, trying to keep the pity out of my voice. "Your history logs mention difficulties." "Difficulties?" "Yes." He smiled, a polite, practiced expression. It was the face of a man who specialized in cultural exchange and apology tours. I moved closer, testing the boundaries of this space opera cliché we found ourselves in. I expected him to be nervous, overwhelmed by the superior stature and psychic aura of a Draconis royal. Instead, he radiated a stillness that I mistook for submission. It was restraint. That night, driven by a nagging instinct that something didn't fit, I bypassed the guest blocks and accessed the secure Terran archives. I wanted to understand the man I would be protecting. I expected to find agricultural reports or trade agreements. Instead, I found a file tagged HFY Omega. The data stream hit my neural link like a physical blow. Images of historical warfare flooded my mind-trenched lines filled with chemical fire, cities vaporized by split atoms, orbital bombardments that cracked crusts. The Terrans hadn't survived because they were lucky. They had survived because they were the most efficient killers the universe had ever spawned. I scrolled through the military protocols. Every weapon system on Thorne's ship was software locked to operate at minimal output. They were handicapping themselves. I gasped as the realization struck me. Peace is not a lack of capacity, but a surplus of discipline. I found a manifesto from their unification era, a chilling line of text that made me shiver in the temperature-controlled room. "True monsters don't bare their teeth." They filed them down to look like smiles. The Terran Union wasn't a refugee camp. It was a sleeping giant, and I had just agreed to wake it up. Protocol 0. Authorize. The bridge light shifted from emergency crimson to a blinding sterile white. The hum beneath my boots changed pitch, rising from a sluggish thrum to a high-frequency scream that rattled my teeth. Thorne didn't shout. He didn't need to. He simply tapped a single command into the console, and the Terra Nova shed its sheep's clothing. "Safety interlocks disengaged," the AI announced, its voice devoid of empathy. "Weapon output at 100%. Target lock." All distinct signatures. The Vorg swarm, a collection of biomechanical horrors that had terrorized the sector for decades, lunged. They expected a struggle. They expected the feeble resistance of a species that specialized in apologies. Instead, they walked into a buzzsaw. Kinetic batteries, previously throttled to diplomatic standards, unleashed hell. Beams of coherent light sliced through the void, turning Vorg dreadnoughts into expanding clouds of superheated gas. It wasn't a battle. It was an extermination. I watched the tactical display. mesmerized by the sheer violence of it. The Terran spirit wasn't about endurance. It was about the application of overwhelming force. They were Deathworlders, evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every day, and they had conquered it. Now, they were conquering the stars. Thorn stood amidst the carnage of the holographic display, his face illuminated by the flaring deaths of enemy ships. He looked like an apex predator finally allowed to hunt. The sheer competence was terrifying, yet as he turned to me, the cold calculation in his eyes melted instantly. He stepped over the trembling deck plates, closing the distance between us in 2 strides. His hand found the back of my neck, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw, grounding me as the universe burned outside the viewport. "Are you afraid?" he asked, his voice steady against the roar of the point defense cannons. "Yes," I breathed, looking up at him, "but not of you." He rested his forehead against mine, a moment of intimate silence inside the chaos. "I told you, Alara, we hold back because we have to, but for you, I would burn this entire galaxy to ash." The connection between us snapped into place, an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of total war. I realized then that his restraint wasn't weakness, it was a promise, and he had just broken it to save me. The aftermath was not the somber affair the Galactic Council expected. When the Terra Nova docked at the high station, its hull scorched but unbroken, the ambassadors were silent. They looked at the Terran delegation with new eyes. The myth of the fragile human was dead, replaced by the reality of the warrior. I stood before the assembly, Thorn at my right hand. He wore his dress uniform, the medals on his chest chiming softly as he moved. He looked harmless again, but now they knew. They could see the shadow of the monster behind the smile. "The Vorg are gone," I announced, my voice amplifying across the chamber. "The Terran Union has secured the sector." Princess Alara, the Draconis High Counselor, stepped forward, his scales pale. "The violence. The data logs show a level of destruction prohibited by the conventions. This was savagery." "No," I cut him off, stepping closer to Thorn, my hand finding his. "It was human ingenuity. You mistook their mercy for inability. You thought them prey, but you invited wolves into your fold." I looked out at the sea of alien faces, seeing the fear and the respect that had been absent before. "I am establishing the Institute for Galactic Stability," I continued. "Its curriculum will be simple. We will teach you that peace is not maintained by the harmless. It is maintained by those dangerous enough to enforce it." Thorn squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement. We had survived the dark, and in doing so, we had reshaped the light. The galaxy was safe, not because the monsters were gone, but because the most dangerous one of all was on our side.